All right, more on Ukraine. Let's welcome retired Major Glenn Ignazio. Major, thank you for your service to the country, and we appreciate you being here today. When you were in the Air Force, you trained Ukrainian soldiers and airmen in combat and in fighter tactics. Give us a sense of that fighting force. I mean, what we keep on hearing, Major, is that they're actually maybe even better trained than the Russians. What do you think of that?
It will give you a couple of dynamics there. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
was on active duty and I was with the California Guard. And it's interesting as the state of California basically hosted a foreign country. It happened to be Ukraine. So the combat rescue forces, which I was involved in, we taught the Ukrainians about that. The same thing with the fighter units in the state. So they got an introduction of how we carry out operations in the Air Force, and they took that knowledge and was able to apply it. We've actually gone there. They've come here. And so they have that type of training. Now, to compare it to the Russians, I mean, it really is case by case of, pilot versus pilot. But they are very well trained, and you can see that they've been very formidable against the Russians. The hardest part is if you strip the emotions from this and you look at the pure raw numbers, that's where things get difficult. When you say that the Russians have 1,000 fighter jets and maybe 60 in the Ukrainian, and that's if they're all flying.
Yeah. We just heard from the congressman. We heard from Senator Graham in the last hour. President Zelensky pleading with the members of the U.S. Congress today for additional lethal aid. What should we be providing them with at this point? And because there's a lot of debate in Washington about what we should do, but from your perspective, what should we be getting them, and then how quickly do we need to get it there?
Sure. First of all, is any kind of supplies or weaponry that they can use on the ground needs to be provided to them to the max extent possible, as fast as possible. Not only now, but also continuing in the future as they burn through those assets. Now, the thing I would really like to touch on is the no-fly zone, because that's been really a hot point.
Right.
And think about what we can do. So if NATO was to immediately go into as a no-fly zone and engage and say shoot down a Russian aircraft, that would be an act of war. Right, that is true by law. But here's something that's been done. If we look at history in Bosnia, we look at history of what happened in Iraq, United Nations Security Council resolutions were able to go in and say, hey, this action is against international peace for the invasion. It's also oppressive to the people because they're killing people. Mm-hmm. The Russians have, in my term, would be doing indiscriminate killing because they're hitting apartment buildings and others. Those are not military targets. So I think that the UN Security Council can put a resolution in to push for a no-fly zone that can be reinforced by NATO and coalition countries, or not NATO. So it looks like it's a unified international force versus U.S. versus Russia, which I think Putin would like.
Yeah, except that, the Russians do have a veto on the Security Council, and they probably would, or the Chinese would kill any resolution. It looks like the UN has pretty much been neutered in all of this. Final word from you, Major. Where do you see this a week from now? There's a lot of red encroaching on that Ukrainian map. Where do you think things are?
I see the occupation actually increasing. We call this prepping the battlefield to help alleviate the forces against the troops. That's what the air power does. And what you're going to see is if you look to the east and the southeast, you see the large oil reserves and the pipelines. So you can't just bomb a country into peace. They're going to occupy. That's what they're doing now. The other thing is they're trying to get as many civilians out of the country. The reason for it is because they're civilians. Everybody that picks up a weapon, so every male, military-aged male that picks up a weapon is now a lawful combatant, not a civilian. So that's not collateral damage. So I believe that the Russians are trying to get as many civilians out. We'll do the indiscriminate bombing and artillery, similar to what they did on into Syria, and then you're going to see their forces go in and occupy and try to take out Kiev. So that would be the engagement for the actual country itself. So they have a lot of forces, a lot of convoys. I do, unfortunately, see the occupation.
All right. Major Glenn Ignazio, thank you again for your service, and thanks for being with us.
Outstanding. Thank you. You guys are supporting things greatly, and appreciate it.
Appreciate you. And,